The upcoming United Nations General Assembly in New York is a fundamental moment for heads of states and government to come together to find mechanisms of dialogue that allows for crises to be effectively resolved. António Guterres was speaking exclusively to SABC News ahead of next week's General Assembly. And of course, the high-level week, will focus on a multitude of issues, from marking the 80th anniversary of the organization to resolving conflicts. It will also touch on development, climate change, mitigation, as well as the AI governance in what is often referred to as the World Cup of diplomacy.
This is a fantastic opportunity. You have 150 heads of state and government, and you have heads of state and government of every single crisis that exists in the world. So this is a fundamental moment for them to come together and to be able to find mechanisms of dialogue, ways to start processes, allowing for crises to be effectively solved. We need leadership from the top. And this is the best moment in the world where we can have all leaders together, and we can, if they want, provide leadership from the top to address the horrible crisis we face in so many places of the world because of conflict, but also to address some of the crucial problems related to sustainable development, climate change, artificial intelligence, and others that will be in the center of the debates during this summit.
You saw him there conducting that interview, and Sherwin joins us live now this evening. Sherwin, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So you covered a number of topics, with the Secretary General, from UN reform to Gaza, Sudan, and the G20. Let's take the Gaza issue first. An independent UN Commission of Inquiry yesterday declaring that genocide is taking place in Gaza, but this is a term that the SG has thus far refused to use. What's the argument that he has made in that regard?
Let me just quickly touch on, Bongiwe, that notion of the World Cup of diplomacy. The Secretary General did a press conference yesterday before our interview today with the entire UN press corps here in New York, and he said the following: some call it the World Cup of diplomacy, but this cannot be about point scoring. It must be about solving problems, and I think Gaza will be very central to initiatives around problem solving that might happen during high-level week next week. And of course, the issue of whether to call this a genocide or not is dominating, South Africa first out of the bat in terms of calling it a genocide, taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. You've heard Navi Pillai's commission, the UN Independent Commission of Inquiry, making that determination this week. Human Rights Watch has called it a genocide. Amnesty International has called it a genocide. An international organization, Association of Genocide Scholars, has determined that a genocide is unfolding in Gaza. But the Secretary General is very reluctant to use that terminology because it has not emanated from a competent organ within the organization, Navi Pillai's commission is an independent body appointed by the Human Rights Council in Geneva. So if in effect they give guidance to member states, but member states are the ones that determine in great essence what the Secretary General can and cannot say. And until the International Court of Justice or the General Assembly or the Security Council determines it's a genocide, then he will pronounce it. But it hasn't stopped him from saying a lot else about what is going on in Gaza, as he did in our interview earlier today. Let's watch.
What's happening in Gaza today is intolerable. Intolerable from the moral point of view, the political point of view, and the legal point of view. Gaza City is being destroyed building by building, and at the same time 300,000 people already left, but left in dramatic circumstances through congested roads. Apparently one new road is being opened today for a few days, and you have massive destruction. And what we have been witnessing since the horrific attacks of Hamas that I always condemned, but in the response in Gaza, what we have witnessed is the higher level of death and destruction that I can remember in any moment of my public life. And this is absolutely intolerable. The suffering of people is unimaginable, because not only we had destruction, not only we had death, but we had serious obstructions of humanitarian aid. We have a famine situation, basic health services do not work, and people are congested in such a way in a small area of Gaza where all diseases can spread and there is no adequate shelter. So it is an unimaginable suffering that must stop now.
Just to reiterate what he says there, Bongiwe, in Gaza, we have witnessed the highest level of death and destruction that I can remember in any moment of my public life. And let me tell you, this has been a long public life for the Secretary General. He was the Prime Minister of Portugal. He was the High Commissioner for 2 terms for refugees in this organization before almost serving an entire 2-term as Secretary General. So quite a statement coming from an individual like that. I will also add that there is, of course, a very important conference that happens before the general debate under the auspices of France and Saudi Arabia. It's called a 2-state solution conference. A number of countries expected to affirm their formal recognition of a future Palestinian state. So certainly a lot happening in terms of the Palestinian question and Gaza in particular next week.
And Sherwin, it's of course, as you know, we continue to look at the situation in Gaza. We don't forget the ongoing wars, particularly in Ukraine and Sudan. This is where civilians continue to bear the brunt, right? And Sudan, of course, simply not received the attention as other conflicts have. And I wonder, what did the SG say about, you know, the situation in Sudan, which represents the largest humanitarian emergency anywhere in the world today?
And that tells you something in the context of what is going on in Gaza, right? That Sudan is, in fact, the largest humanitarian emergency anywhere in the world today. Some 30 million people need humanitarian aid. We understand some 12 million people are now either internally displaced or as refugees. There is concern that this is going to become the largest global hunger crisis anywhere in the world. Famine has been determined in parts of northern Darfur. There is the capital of North Darfur, Al-Fasher, has been under siege by the rapid support forces for more than a year, and the two parties cannot agree on a ceasefire despite international pressure from the African Union, from IGAD, from something called the Quad that includes the United States, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and other countries. And so despite the heavy lifting diplomatically that has happened, we are not seeing the requisite changes in the context on the ground. This is what Guterres had to say on Sudan.
We are working hard to try to, first of all, as peace is not to be seen immediately, but we are working hard with the two sides for the protection of civilians and for humanitarian access, to be able to cross the lines and to be able to access the whole of the territory. But the central problem is that the war has a cruelty and a barbarity that is absolutely intolerable. And you mentioned Al-Fasher. I mean, in Al-Fasher, you have 200,000 people that, as in some areas, a famine situation that is constantly bombarded. And when you ask for a ceasefire, it was rejected by the RFS. And at the same time, even convoys of humanitarian aid have been bombed. And today, humanitarian aid is simply not being able to get there.
Impunity is rife in Sudan.
Is absolutely intolerable. And as you said, there is total impunity. And the impunity comes from the geopolitical divides. And the geopolitical divides paralyze the Security Council.
Saudi Arabia is the fourth country in that Quad group that is seeking a diplomatic pathway forward here in terms of Sudan. But we're into the third year of a civil war here. Two military generals that simply could not find negotiated compromises, and it's civilians. 30 million people in need of aid. That is a large proportion of an entire country that once was the breadbasket of that region in Central Africa.
And Sherwin, before I let you go, of course the G20 summit is coming up, and I wonder if the SG will be coming?
He confirmed he's coming, unlike Donald Trump, the US president, who is sending his vice president. António Guterres is not sending Amina Mohammed. He'll be there in person. He confirmed that to me. And of course, a number of key issues, right, that are very pertinent to the agenda of the Secretary General of this United Nations in terms of debt relief, in terms of rejigging and reorganizing the international financial architecture that he believes is central to filling that above $4 trillion gap annually that is required in terms of SDG implementation. Only 35% of the SDGs are on track or heading in the right direction, which means 65% are failing. And that's talking about poverty, that's talking about hunger, that's talking about women's equality and empowerment, that's talking about water and sanitation. And isn't that a big topic in parts of Gauteng today? So a lot of areas we covered in that discussion. We also asked him about the process that will unfold beginning next year in terms of selecting the next Secretary General. António Guterres' term ends in December next year, and there has, of course, been a very long and sustained push for a female to take up that position, despite the headwinds that faces. I asked him about that. So certainly a lot to look forward to when that entire interview airs tonight on Late Edition, around 10 p.m. Central African time tonight.
Yes, and you don't want to miss that interview. You can see it there on your side of the screens coming up at 10. It promises to be one that touches on a myriad of issues, as you've gotten a glimpse there of what Sherwin and the UN Secretary General were in conversation about. And Sherwin, thank you so much for your time.